Growing up in the central region of the island of Newfoundland, in a region made up of isolated bays and coves, with a good driving distance for some to get to more urbanized centers, there were dynamics that developed in relationships between towns. In my hometown of Botwood, which was all of 5,000 people in my childhood days, our immediate neighbors on the other side of rivers were Peterview to the west and Northern Arm to the north, smaller communities just minutes away. But to be from the other side of those rivers meant some prejudices developed. We had nicknames for our neighbors that I won't repeat, especially since one of my best friends from grade 7 lived in one of these towns, in the town of Peterview. A half an hour southwest of Botwood, along the Trans-Canada Highway, were the towns of Grand Falls and Windsor. Until 1988, when the railway was ended in Newfoundland, these two towns were separated by railroad tracks. Even now, among folks who remember, still say if you lived in Windsor, you lived on the other side of the tracks, away from the 99-year-old pulp and paper mill prosperity of Grand Falls. These two towns amalgamated some years ago, unlike Botwood, Northern Arm, and Peterview, who could not resolve their politics. The history is still there. Either you or your ancestors are still, from time to time, from the other side, from over there, someplace other than where we are here, here being the center of our own universe. Ideally, as people of faith who are followers of Christ, we find ourselves in a community that welcomes one another in the church. We are a people who believe in the commonality that is us being together. We are present to one another, together in one space together. And I believe the features that make us a people of faith include actions of love, kindness, joy, openness, learning, peace, and mutual respect. Our faith includes these actions, but we're not limited by these actions. If we do them, we are probably within the realm of being a faithful people. Regardless of what we call ourselves, we agree that we are a part of a kind of human goodness that shows that we care for one another, or as Christ puts it and teaches, we love one another. I say this because we commit ourselves to growing in the faith. And growing up in the church, I believed that Jesus was the perfect ideal of this, being not just like God, but by embodying God in physical form on this earth. Jesus was it. Jesus was the example. Christ was the one to look up to above all examples and role models. And for me, as a member of the church, Christ still is. But Matthew 15:21-28 is one example where he is still learning. How Christ reacts in this passage is anything but ideal. Through the Galilean woman of this morning's Matthew passage, I think it's fair to say that Jesus' world was rocked by the interaction. In films produced using the Synoptic Gospel stories, I still have this image of the dropped jaw Jesus. The dropped jaw Jesus. There are depictions of Christ in full-size portraits of his face where he looks more European than Palestinian or Mediterranean, however that looks nowadays. There is the portrait of the laughing Jesus that was introduced to me by sojourners in the more charismatic Christian traditions, where the same long, flowing, blonde-haired, white-looking Jesus is looking, in this case, more directly at the portrait creator, but with the mouth wide open in roaring laughter. It's a portrayal of Christ that always makes me smile, in spite of my more left-center traditional upbringing. But I have yet to see, my friends, a similar portrait with a sepia-colored background of Christ's jaw gaping open in embarrassment. Because that's what I remember from a movie about Jesus when I was in grade school. Jesus is shocked in a scene where the Galilean woman says to him, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." Jesus has already told her, "I came for the lost sheep of Israel." Jesus kicks up his prejudice a notch. Some commentators even suggested, who I listened to this week, does this suggest that Jesus is racist in this moment? "I didn't come for you, I came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel." The marginalized mother, desperately seeking help for her sick daughter, from one, the only one she knows who can heal her, won't go away. She's already decided with determination. Jesus is the one. He's the one. He's the miracle worker, the healer. He's got the answer that's going to make my daughter better. I'm not taking my answer as no. I'll take whatever crumbs of help I can get from him. And she says it forthright to him. Crumbs, if that's what he thinks, I'm going to say it directly to his eyes right now. "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." Jesus actually demonstrates the verses that the lectionary puts in parentheses this morning. Matthew 15, 10 through 20 can be included in this morning's reading to make twice as long a passage, but also twice as long a sermon, because there's a lot in this passage. In these verses, Jesus tells the crowd with the Pharisees present that the students of the law teach unjust lessons with the Torah. Out of their mouths is less helpful than what one puts into the mouth. Food will be digested, but what we can speak can be poison to one another's ears. Words can hurt. "Hold on now, teacher," the woman says. "I will not be denied. I will not be turned away just because I don't belong to your people. But since you have your own pre-selected audience, I will take whatever I can get from you, Jesus. I will gladly take your crumbs. Please help me." Jesus might have said, "Woman, you are one determined mother. If you won't give up, you will get what you want every time. I declare to you now that your daughter is healed." To be granted justice is to be welcomed into a place of opportunity. To be determined enough to demand it is courageous. The courage of one mother to take care of her daughter is the act of a loving God. It's the Canaanite woman who teaches the grace here. It's the Canaanite woman who is indigenous to her home before Israel arrived, who teaches the lesson here. God welcomes us into the experience of community. God calls us to be on a journey that reconciles to justice. And when Christ is healed of his own misjudgment, learns from his own mistake, his capacity to teach God's good news, I believe, is strengthened. His good news that we love one another is lived by a deeper example, thanks to this woman. "We are called to love one another, teacher," she might say. My friends, indeed, we are called to love one another. To be welcomed and reconciled is a journey seeking justice for our indigenous cousins in our land, for all who are of the BIPOC community, for all who seek to be included. We have to continue our work to be includers in the church and in the world. Loving one another is that journey's quest. Walter Brueggemann, from his work, The Bible Makes Sense, wrote these words: "The good news calls our whole way of existence into question. If we are indeed in God's image, then the central task of our life is covenant making and covenant keeping. It's a promise both rich and heavy for us to say that finally we shall be like God." To be welcomed and reconciled are acts that we in the United Church live out and are committed to living out with learning for generations to come. So, my friends, as loving people, may we continue to live out, hope for, and experience what it might possibly mean to be welcomed and reconciled in the faith and in this world. May God continue to go with us. May Christ continue to teach us, and may the Holy Spirit continue to inspire us. this day and always. Thanks be to God.